Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Lynda, and I'm originally from Michigan, now living in the St. Louis metro area. I'm a college coach with School Match for You and have a daughter at University of Chicago.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. This week in the news, we continue our conversation about an article that appeared in the Chronicle of Higher Education about the money problem no college can escape. As I'll read the third of 6 entries addressing that topic. And then we transition, and Lisa and Lynda answer a question from a listener. And this listener wants to know, what is a stealth applicant? The listener heard Hillary talk about stealth applicants. So Lisa and Lynda break that down. And then for our interview, Peg Keogh is the Chief Academic Officer at College Aid Pro. And we'll be talking mostly about the CSS PROFILE today. And then for College Spotlight, Dr. Ramon Blakley looking at UT Austin, the University of Texas at Austin. So friends, last week I read an article to you from a professor at Johns Hopkins. It was a scathing denunciation, a castigation, a takedown of some of the policies of the Trump administration. This week, a completely different perspective. You know, Gary Stocker talks about 2 key problems that he's identified that have nothing to do with the Trump administration. In fact, his article is entitled, "It's Not All About Politics." So I'm going to read the brief article, and then I'll make a few comments afterward. Just so you know, the Chronicle of Higher Education is the gold standard when it comes to what everybody in the profession reads to keep apprised of what's going on in the world of higher ed. And so I strongly recommend, if you're not subscribed, you pay your $10, subscribe, and make sure you sign up to get their special features emailed daily. I was talking to a listener from Connecticut this week who said, I went ahead and signed up, and wow, that's some really great stuff. There was a great article about the University of Chicago's financial problems, and that's a school that we've been taking a look at. So, I don't get a penny from the Chronicle, but I think I know our listeners well enough to know you're very curious and you love learning. This would really be worth your $10. So anyway, here's Gary Stocker. It's not all about politics. Let's not overreact to sermons and lectures from Washington. Only a tiny percentage of colleges are earning the wrath of the federal government. So what he's talking about here is when you look at who's really impacted by the endowment, or if you really look at who's being cut back, who's being affected by the cutbacks on federal research money, it's really a small fraction of schools, right? It's large R1 schools, either flagships, and not all flagships. Just some of the flagships that get the most research money, and pretty much none of those flagships are really impacted by the endowment tax. And then it's very wealthy, selective private schools. So once again, I'll go back and read that sentence again. Only a tiny percentage of colleges are earning the wrath of the federal government. And the financial challenges that hundreds of other colleges face predate January 20th. Politics at the presidential level do not alter the basic economic problem higher education faces. The fact that there simply are too many colleges and not enough students willing to pay even heavily discounted tuition in order to attend them all. I am most concerned about 2 non-Trump related developments. First, the increase in short notice college closures. In the last 18 months or so, colleges giving longer timelines for closure, like Fontbern University in Missouri, are increasingly rare. If a college gives any indication that it is in financial trouble, it now runs a serious risk of creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. So some are hiding damaging financial information from their stakeholders. Second, the accreditation process continues to be unresponsive to market conditions. Decades of focusing on dotting I's and crossing T's have given us a system that focuses on inputs and it largely ignores outputs. Who are the accreditors working for? The colleges who pay their fees or the students? Gary asks. Accreditors need to help more colleges close in a responsible fashion. College leaders should take a long-term outlook and create balanced budgets with reasonable revenue and cost forecasts. They should also increasingly look to mergers. They should look to scaling both their academic and their non-academic operations across 5 or more colleges will become a more common solution to budgetary woes. Other industries have engaged in considerable merger and acquisition consolidation over the past decades. It's now higher ed's turn to do it as well. For those working in colleges, I suggest they monitor enrollment trends, net tuition revenue, 4-year graduation rate, endowment value, and endowment draw. So that's a term we haven't talked about, an endowment draw. So I'm actually supporting a couple endowments at the school that my kids attended. You know, one is for catastrophic financial aid for students who fall on tough times. Another one is for catastrophic aid for faculty. Like they find out, oh, my car broke down, or, you know, I need to have a big health, expense. And then one is for people to take their first overseas trip. And so I had to have meetings when these endowment funds were set up to what the draw was going to be. And the draw basically is the percentage of money that will be taken from the endowment and moved to the operating budget. So a lot of times schools will use like 4 or 5% just because they never, ever, ever want to sacrifice the principal. You always want to make sure that that endowment stays intact and grows. So normally endowments like to grow about 7%. If you have a drawdown 4 or 5, then you still, definitely keep your principal and you even increase it a little bit every year. So that's what he's talking about. When schools get on really tough times, though, they can have too high of a draw because obviously that puts more money into the operating budget. If you take 8% instead of 4%, yeah, it puts more money into the operating budget, but then you deplete your endowment. I know this technical got into the weeds, but hopefully it made sense. All right, almost done. He has one last thing here, he says. It takes about 4 or 5 years to recover from one bad enrollment year, and low graduation rates will be the kryptonite of many colleges. Strong endowment value and limited utilization of the endowment mark financially secure colleges. All right, so a little bit about Gary Stalker. So he is the founder of a company called College Viability, LLC, and he founded it in 2018. He also has served as chief of staff to the college president at Westminster College, and it was there that he started to see the unbelievable financial issues that were besetting so many small colleges that he started building tools to address them. And one of the tools he built is his college viability app. And it's used to consult to help the financial strength of colleges and the academic strength of colleges. And what he focuses on is colleges that are at risk. So he's just kind of been like a national leader when it comes to transparency with colleges, particularly the financial transparency of where they're at. So what are a couple takeaways from this article? Why would the problem persist of people not being transparent about the financial woes and all of a sudden, whoa, we're closing? I mean, he identified it, right? Like if word leaks out that you're in trouble, good luck surviving, because who wants to attend a college that's in trouble? So if you are already having a hard time getting the right number of heads in beds, how are you going to survive if word is out on the street that this college is in serious danger of closing? You're just not probably going to make it. Your enrollment will be even lower. So that leads to some more clandestine behavior. And then all of a sudden an announcement, you're closing. So how does this apply to our listeners? You just got to really, really, really look at the financial health of the colleges for your student. We've talked about a lot of tools to help you with that. I'm going to share another tool coming up that I think it'll be a little bit of an investment, but it's probably really worth it, especially if you have any concern at all if the college you're looking at is in good financial shape. But I'll get into that in another episode. One thing I don't think we've talked enough about is looking at those ratings, right? S&P Global, Moody's, Fitch. These are the three big rating agencies that give a rating to each college's financial health. Now, those ratings are really important to the college because it impacts the interest rate that they have to pay when they're borrowing money. And most colleges do borrow money because let's say you're going to like revamp all your dorms or have a brand new science center or whatever, all these different things that might be $100 million. Like not everybody just has that sitting around, to cash flow it and just pay it off. So a lot of times you take out loans for that. And so the interest rate, just like a mortgage or a car, is going to determine like how much your payment is. So it's of paramount concern. So these rating agencies, they do a really comprehensive look at schools to look at their financial health. So one thing, you may want to do for all of the schools on your students list is just look up their bond ratings with Moody's, S&P Global, and Fitch and just see where it's at. Because it's pretty thorough and pretty comprehensive. I'm not going to say it's gospel, but it's a very, very good and very reputable tool, and it's been happening, for well over 100 years. So anyway, I just think hopefully you guys are enjoying this. I'm trying to draw attention to the fact that there's never been a time that higher ed has been in this kind of financial trouble. Maybe during world wars, but certainly not in my lifetime. When you look at the great financial crisis, 07, 09, it was absolutely devastating to colleges, public and private. It was devastating to public colleges because they changed their appropriations for their state money. And they, instead of giving X percentage to higher ed, they allocated a lot of it elsewhere because they're in survival mode. And most states have really not come back to those levels. Some of them are only at 50% of the level of the money they were getting before the great financial crisis. Obviously, COVID was just absolutely brutal to colleges. The FAFSA fiasco has been absolutely brutal that we've seen colleges have to endure with the FAFSA rollout. And then you heard us talk a lot about the enrollment cliff, demographic cliff, birth dearth, all that, people having about 1/3 less kids, which always happens during financial times. But 1/3 less kids means less kids to go to college. So many experts have just come out and say, there's too many colleges in this country for the demand. I saw recently Jeff Salengo thinks as many as 25% may close, which is a really daunting number. And then the biggest threat, almost everyone will tell you, has been, recently the challenge to institutional authority, endowment, loss of international students, or not even knowing till late into the year if you're going to even have international students, and then research dollars. And so, but Gary brings up a good point. That's not every school, but it's been the wealthiest and some of the most in-demand schools that pretty much all across the board are having problems. In fact, if you sign up for our newsletter, YCBK Plus, we literally have 3 articles in this month's newsletter about 3 different colleges and their drastic financial changes that they're having to make. So hopefully you guys are enjoying this. I'm halfway through. Next up is Robert Goldberg. Once again, a completely different perspective that all 6 of these have. Robert Goldberg is the Vice President for Finance at Swarthmore College. So we'll see what he has to say as he's looking at the finances of Swarthmore, and he has some interesting insight. So you'll hear that next week. But let's transition to Lisa and Lynda talking about stealth applicants.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Hey, Lynda. How are you today?
Hey, Lisa, I am doing well. I'm excited about this question.
It's an interesting question. And so this listener references episode 525 and with our wonderful Hillary. And she is going to ask a question about something that Hillary discussed. So let's listen to it.
In episode 525, talking with Connecticut College Hillary, you guys mentioned a stealth applicant, one who doesn't show up in the school's funnel until they apply in the Common App. And I'm just wondering, how would a student show up before their Common App aside from an on-campus visit or going to a college fair visit? Are there other ways that a kid would show up in your funnel? Thank you.
All right. So, how do you avoid being a stealth applicant, Lynda? What are some steps the student can take to not be a ghost?
Well, it sounds exciting, right? I'm going to be a stealth applicant. It sounds cool,
But it's
but
not. It's
it's
actually
not.
not.
It's not cool. You don't want to be a stealth applicant.
Yeah, spying and college applications, they just don't go together.
No, this is where you want to be, like that kid who's like, hey, here I am. Look at me. I mean, do you remember that show, like Welcome Back, Kotter, Horseshack?
Lynda,
I
you
know.
just told everyone how old we are.
No, no, no.
Yes, I do remember that show,
Okay.
but
Well, I'm sure there's a clip on YouTube, kids, that you can
yeah,
take
I
a
could
look.
sing this theme song, but I won't.
But I
Yeah.
I won't. Okay. Anywho, you want to be very out there and let them know that you are interested in them. So there are some easy ways to do this. And the simplest and uh, the what I always start out telling students is go out and request information from them, join their mailing list. So even if you're already getting their brochures, I love telling my prospective business students, like, now is the time you want to start thinking like a business person, right? Because they are just kind of shooting out into the void, hoping that you will respond to them. So once you go out and say, hello, university, I'm interested, you're going to get put into a different bucket and you show up on their radar screen. But then you need to actually open the emails and read them and click through. And I don't want students or families to think that this is a chore, like we're just clicking buttons to demonstrate interest. But you're actually doing research and you're learning about the school, and they, based on your responses, they may be sending you different information. So it's a lot of schools are really sophisticated with this kind of thing. So that's the first easiest way to avoid being a stealth applicant. And then, of course, register for virtual sessions. Certainly go and visit on in person if you can, but you can visit schools virtually, and a lot of times they'll have webinars, they'll have sessions for your particular major, for engineering or
Yeah.
business or
Yeah.
pre-med or whatever it is.
Yeah. And that's, kind of like also like, interacting with your local representative. So that is the admissions staff member who handles the admissions for your geographic region or school. And so you might run into them at a local college fair, or if they come visit your school, it would be really great if you can go to that session and then maybe email them a thank you or a follow-up question. And that's another way of just getting your face in front of them and getting on their radar, and keeping in mind that those are the people who are going to do the first pass on your application. And so if they kind of know you and know that you're interested, they're probably going to give you a more favorable read right off the bat.
Yeah.
So,
And thank you notes are always good.
yeah,
Always good. I mean,
I love
whether
you.
it's to
Thank
your
you notes.
grandma or to your college rep.
Yeah, and I just have to say, as a mom of a 2026 student, so I'm doing this professionally, and I'm also trying to do it personally to varying degrees of success. That we really do. She really does seem to get a lot of information from actually reading certain emails or watching the information session or talking to the reps when they come to school. So, I mean, I see it in my house. So it's not just not being a stealth applicant, right? It's also learning more about the school.
Yeah. And one that I like to, and I'm not sure how much this helps you not be a stealth applicant, but I know you're on social media, students. I know you're on Instagram. I know you're on TikTok. And go ahead and follow your school, the admissions, the program you're interested in, and then start taking a look at clubs. And I don't know that it's going to, will the admissions office know that you have followed them? You're one of their 120,000 followers. Maybe not, but you might see something on that account that sparks an interest in you that leads you to reach out and make a connection with your admissions officer. And that's good. I mean, you're engaging and you're learning more about the school. I My philosophy is if you're doing a good job of researching a school, you will be doing a good job of demonstrating interest and getting on that school's radar.
Yeah. And hopefully, the more you like a school, the more you should be drawn to the content that they're giving out, right? It should be sort of like a symbiotic kind of thing. So, but yeah, being a stealth thing is probably good for a stealth bomber, but not for a stealth applicant.
Nope, nope, definitely not. Great question, though.
All right, thank you, and good luck to your student. And may they be known to all of the admission reps who evaluate their applications.
Absolutely.
And thanks to the generosity of the Princeton Review for sending in that SpeakPipe question, you are going to get your choice of one of the following 4 books: College Admissions 101, Essays That Kicked Apps, The Best 390 Colleges, Princeton Review Digital SAT Prep. Now, in order to get your book, you just need to send me an email at mark@schoolmatch4u.com, put Princeton Book Giveaway in the subject line, and in the body of the email, put the title of the book you want and put the episode number where we discussed your question, and just share a brief description of the question that you asked.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, Peg and I continue our conversation of FAFSA and some of the missteps that students and parents make when completing the FAFSA, but we just touched on that very briefly. Almost all of today looks at some of the missed opportunities when it comes to the CSS profile, which is by far more complex and trickier and more in-depth. It can sometimes take a first-time person that has a business 5 hours to fill out this form. So we kind of spend our time today talking about the CSS profile. Listen and enjoy. And Peg, here's another one. Overestimating how much parents can contribute to the cost of college. What do you want to share on this?
Yeah, that's a question that every parent I've ever worked with are like, what should I put here, Peg? So they basically ask you, how much is your parent or parents going to contribute for XYZ school year? Not for the all 4 years. This question, you can hurt yourself how you answer it, and you can't really help yourself. And so one rule of thumb is, if you know, and you should know, estimates of your student aid index, never put more than that estimate. Because if you do, if the college thinks you can afford $40,000 a year and you say, I can pay $45,000 the first year, now you're going to be paying $45,000. They'll say, okay, I guess we were wrong on our thoughts of what was affordable to this family. So that's the first rule, is don't do that. Sometimes people have college savings accounts, and it makes sense to look at that and divide it by 4. But it totally depends on what the estimated SAIs are. So you just have to it's not a blanket answer, but it's something that you want to strategically, again, you're not going to flat out lie, but you want to strategically answer it, because I have seen where parents are like, well, I want them to accept my child, so I put this number. And I'm like, can you afford this? I'm like, no. I'm like, well, the college thinks you can now, so now we got to reach back out, because you put 60,000 and you can't afford anywhere near 60,000, but you told them that. So it's a situation, I'm a big advocate for, I know parents want their kids to get into certain schools for XYZ reasons, but if you get in and you can't afford it, that's not a good scenario either. So you've got to keep that affordability piece in mind. And that's one where people will want to over project because they want the college to see some big number because they think it's going to help. So,
Yeah, no, I like your advice of don't go over what the SAI says, and everybody should be running net price calculators or using College Aid Pro's, calculations or something, and have a sense of what they're likely going to be asked when they do these forms. I have another boarding school example because I did that longer than I did college admissions, and it was more recent. But I can think of scenarios on both sides of this parent's estimate question where either the financial aid director or even the business manager wanted to talk to me. So on one hand, there have been times where a family put a number that looked quite higher than what it looked like they could pay. And I got called in because I was primarily working with the family, and they're like, "Does this sound right?" And you're right, Peg. Like the thinking there was, we don't know if Uncle Joe is throwing 20K in, so they know their situation better than us. So they were likely to be asked to pay more than what the calculation said if they said they could pay more, because the mindset was the financial forms don't reveal all the other sources of finances they have, and if this is what they can think, then they know their situation better than us. So that's the danger there. But I've also seen the danger on the other side where someone puts down zero. And, the thinking there was, you now look like a business risk to us. That, you're going to come in here and can't pay your bills and not graduate. And so do you see a danger there as well, going all the way to the other extreme? And also, quite honestly, people can be offended too. Like, education is valuable, it's worth something. And if you look like you're just wanting something for nothing, I don't always think that's the best way to build a relationship with the financial aid office. Thoughts on that?
yeah, I would agree. I don't think I've ever counseled even families, lower income or going through a rough patch to put zero for exactly that reason. Like, and we do that in appeals too. Like, you want to make it clear to the college, like, we're willing to sacrifice, we're willing to take out reasonable loans or change our standard of living or whatever because this school is valuable and it's worth something and we want to contribute. So that's where, it's the strategy of it. Like, but for one family, like $10,000 could be a stretch if they make
Sure.
$55,000 a year, and that's a very valid amount, or 7,000. Whereas another family, to your point, Mark, it's just a slap in the face to the college. It's like, really, you make $400,000 and you're telling me you can contribute seven? That doesn't, 7,000, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So it's another one of those questions where there's strategy, there's honesty, but there's strategy, and you just have to be careful because you're right. If you lowball it, that's going to be an issue too.
Yeah, and I've seen it be an issue for both reasons, both because it's offensive to the school, like, such sort of an entitlement mindset, like almost a sort of a welfare mindset that you don't think what we have is valuable and you won't make a sacrifice, but also you look like a business risk to us too. Like, we don't want you to come in here and you have to leave right away because you can't pay. So it can, either way that can sort of, land not too well.
Yeah, in colleges, that makes me think of, they care about their retention stats. And so
Yep.
that comes into mind when they're making all these, they don't want kids leaving freshman, sophomore year because the parents are belly up and like, sorry, you got to go in state now. We can't afford it anymore. They don't want that. So they're, and on the CSS profile, they have a lot of information about that family. So they can be trying to put it all together. And all of that goes into play when they create these financial aid packages.
I mean, look at international students, right? Like they have to show proof of income, to get the
Yeah.
visas and everything to come over. And so it's not just that international students are in some special category. In one sense they are, but it's the concept of we don't want you coming all the way over here and then you can't pay and you're stuck.
Yeah.
So that principle can also apply to domestics, even if it's,
Yep, absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, these colleges, most of them are nonprofits, but they are big business. I know a woman who runs financial aid and admissions at a school in Texas, and she said at a conference, she said, if I had to do it again, I would get an MBA instead of a master's in counseling because it's all about yields and numbers and algorithms and projections, and it's just the world that they live in now. So this creating financial aid packages is not some random deal. very strategically done and very different from family to family.
Yeah, when I interviewed Greg Roberts from UVA on the podcast, he said he was hiring a data science analyst in bringing them into the admission office, because
Yep.
of that value. So yeah, data science, data analysis, that stuff is really valuable. And recently I had a question on our podcast from a listener. I want to be an admission officer when I grow up. What should I do? And I answered this with Hillary Dickman, who's an admission officer at Colorado College, and she talked about get your data analysis skills down because that's such a valuable skill that we're always looking for. And so yeah, that data analysis role is huge in the world of big data that we're in.
Yeah, enrollment management 25 years ago there was no such thing, and now it's a big thing.
Yeah. So Peg, occasionally some schools have their own additional financial forms, either in addition to the profile or in place of the profile, never really in place of the FAFSA. Do you know a few of those schools? Any schools come to mind that do that? And what's your advice for a family if they have to fill out one of those school-specific financial aid forms that are out there in addition to, other than the FAFSA profile?
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, it's never in lieu of the FAFSA. It might be in lieu of the CSS, or it might be in
In
addition
addition.
to the
Yeah.
CSS. But like off the top of my head,
Mm-hmm.
Princeton, U Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
Georgia Tech, and it's just like when you're looking at the FAFSA and the CSS, just take a deep breath. Look at the form. If you need guidance because some of the stuff is over your head, then just seek professional guidance to get it done. It's not going to be anything that's dramatically different than the CSS profile. They might just decide not to use the CSS profile, not to pay College Board, and they have their own way of doing it. So it's not, I'm not going to say it's rare, but it's not super common that colleges do that. But those are a few off the top of my head that do. At least at this point, they're doing it.
So let's talk about sort of some meta level advice for families. Comment on the first one. Start early. Sophomore year is ideal. Thoughts?
Yeah, so when it comes to financial aid, the year that you're going to be reporting on in the financial aid forms starts the middle of your child's sophomore year in high school. So, and most people, that's most parents, that's the last thing they're thinking about. What kind of financial aid are we going to get? They're just not thinking about that because their kid's a sophomore in high school. But that's the year that matters. So I always I love when I get sophomore parents because I can kind of give them the lay of the land so they understand things and it helps with the whole process moving forward. It's not like there's tons of things they need to do, but you don't want to inflate your income. And sometimes people do things. I just met with a mom the other day and she's like, we liquidated an IRA for this reason. What do we do? And I'm like, all right, well, we're going to have to appeal and you're going to have to show proof and da da. If she had known that, she might not have done that, because she maybe didn't have to do it in that tax year. So, and parental income is by far the biggest driver in the student aid index calculation, which is how they decide your need-based eligibility. So anything you can, in financial aid, we all want to be poor. That's what we want, right? We want to have the least amount of income, least amount of assets. So that's why I say that. It's good because you start learning and it's not as stressful for the family to have to learn it all right when their child becomes a senior in high school. But also for that reason, that's why I love sophomore year. There's also certain kinds of investments that students can own that we can get out of the student's name, but you want to do it before January of the student's sophomore year in high school. So that's my reason for saying start early. It's less stressful because it's not a time crunch, and also some strategies can be implemented.
So here's another one. Don't take advice from family or friends. What's some common bad advice that you hear family and friends giving families?
All the time, I'm not going to submit financial aid forms because my sister told me it doesn't do any good, or my neighbor told me his kid applied XYZ and they didn't get anything. And so I tell people, friends and family are lovely, but unless you're going to sit down with that person, lay down your tax returns on the table and show exactly how you're exactly the same kind of family from an income and tax standpoint, and then talk about your kids in depth and make sure your kids are exactly the same. And I'm kidding because nobody's going to do that. And no two families are the same financially, or no two people are the same. It's really not a good idea to take advice from friends and family. We talked earlier about why it's so important to submit financial aid forms for most families. So it could really be a huge mistake. That's the biggest one that people every year, people are, not contentiously, but they'll just say, I'm not doing it because XYZ person didn't do it, or I was at a party and everybody said it's a pain and it doesn't get you anything. And it really depends on the student, the family, and the schools, honestly.
So here's another one. Don't use rankings as your main guide when building a list. What do you want to say on this one, Peg?
Yeah, so rankings, I mean, some of the rankings I like, but the key with rankings is you've got to look at the rubric, right? You've got to look at how they're getting those rankings. And US News and World Report, the most known one, part of their rankings, a big chunk of it might even be close to 40%, is Provost ranking other colleges, right? Well, as a parent, I was a parent paying for tuition. I don't care what the provost at Amherst thinks of Williams. Like, what do I care? I care about class size and maybe even happiness factor of the kids and different things that matter to me. And it's been happening forever and ever where people know about schools because of the ranking. So they think schools that are ranked lower are no good, or God forbid you haven't heard of a school. That means it must be terrible. And it's just absolutely not true. You really, really need to find schools that are affordable and where your child is going to thrive. It doesn't matter if everybody in your neighborhood has heard of the school or if it's the top ranked school. And like for my example, for me, I'm in the industry. My son went to Indiana University in the business school at Kelly. My daughter went to James Madison University. People out in Seattle, they don't even know what JMU is. They've never even heard of it. Doesn't matter to me as a parent. That's where my kids belonged. They went there, they thrived. It was affordable for my husband and myself. Other name brand schools they got into was like, nope, not affordable. And I knew as the parent it wasn't as good a fit anyway. So that's why I say, stay away from the rankings. You can use them, you can look at them, but then take the time to see how they're getting those numbers. And does that matter to your child and their decision? Does it matter to you as a parent when you're guiding your child? So use it as a guide, but don't start. Many people start there. So then thousands of schools aren't even on their radar, aren't even on the student's radar, which is really unfortunate.
And another thing that's kind of a twin to what you're talking about at the other side of the coin is, if you're a family that can't afford full cost of attendance, you should know, is this a school that even gives away merit-based money? Because when you start going up that selectivity tier, and the rankings are usually highly correlated to selectivity, that's where you run into, the schools that either give no merit-based money away, or maybe it's like a Duke that they have some, but it's very, very hard to get it because it's hard enough just to get into the place. And so they have it in such
Exactly.
small
Yeah.
quantities. And that I see that as a big problem in counseling, right? Where people just assume, well, do they really think, that I can pay whatever, $90,000? Well, the formulas take a lot of your discretionary money, more than families think that it should take. And once you get into those higher ranked schools, good luck with getting merit-based money because a lot of them just don't do it.
Yep. The Ivies, the Stanfords, the MITs of the world, and I see these kids and they're super kids, I call them. They've done all this stuff. They have great grades and test scores. And I'm like, that's great. That's wonderful. Congratulations. But that's not gonna get you a dime at Princeton. It's just not.
And it's not even those. Like Franklin and Marshall doesn't give any merit-based aid. Carleton doesn't give any merit-based aid. Like,
Yep.
school families just really need to know, like, who gives merit-based if you're looking at the full sticker and you can't afford it.
Yep.
I just thought of that because it's tends to be those highly ranked schools that have the clout in the marketplace usually and have enough people willing to pay full sticker that they don't need to give merit.
Yep.
So understanding your family's unique college affordability planning opportunities. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, that ties into what we're just talking about, Mark.
Hmm.
Like they need to you need, and we've said this a couple times, both of us, you need to know your student aid indexes. You need to have an estimate. You need to know what kind of family you are. Are you a full pay everywhere? And you need to look for merit. Is that the name of the game for discounts? You could be need based at some schools and not need based at other schools. You could be the same thing with merit. So you need to understand that piece. And then as a family, you need to understand your planning opportunities. And by that, I mean, like, for example, if you're divorced or separated, like uh, tons of schools aren't going to look at both of you. That could make it much more affordable. Other schools will look at both of you in the CSS group, but then even within that group, there's some schools that even though they take the CSS profile, they don't look at the non-custodial parent. That's a planning opportunity. If you are lucky enough to own your home and have no mortgage and say it's worth $1 million, or out here in Seattle, $2 million, there's certain schools that aren't going to look at that. There's certain schools that require the CSS that typically looks at it, but they don't, like a Stanford. Even though the form asks it, they have a philosophy. We don't expect parents to tap that. That's a massive planning opportunity for that family. So Stanford could be really different than a Northwestern that looks at your home equity pretty seriously. These are all, and this is what I love, right? I'm a planner.
Sure.
I love this stuff, right? And it helps families, like their eyes just get big. And it's like, it doesn't have to be so expensive if you understand your family and how you fit at different schools. And we like to say the school's business plan. What's their business plan? How do they figure out how much families can afford? And there could be little or massive planning opportunities for different families. And honestly, you just don't know what you don't know as a parent. It has nothing to do with being not being intelligent. You just don't know the space. And when it comes, especially to the CSS profile schools, one parent said to me one year, it's very opaque. And I said, that's a great word. It's a great word. And that's at College Aid Pro. That's our big thing, is being an advocate for families and increasing transparency as much as we can for families. But that's what I mean by that. There are significant planning opportunities that families have, and they might not even know it. And they might be just hitting schools that they like or their kids like, where they're not taking advantage of those opportunities from an affordability standpoint. And those schools that they're missing could be great academic and personal fits as well.
You know when I really realized how opaque this process was? I was having lunch with a financial aid officer from a CSS profile school, one of those really highly ranked schools, and I wanted to know what their home equity multiplier was because that impacts me, right? I mean, you see schools using all of home equity, none of home equity, capping at 1.2, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 income. And this was like 30 minutes into a lunch, so there's like some rapport. And the person said to me, like, that's like proprietary, and they didn't want to share that. Well, to me, that should not be proprietary because I'm trying to build lists of schools that are affordable for families, and knowing what your home equity policy, that can make all the difference between whether I put a school on your list or not. Now, I know that other schools would share that. Some do, some keep that close to the vest, some don't. What's been your experience with schools being transparent with their home equity multiplier, Peg?
It varies. To your point, like I've had schools that will say exactly what you said. That's proprietary information and we won't share it. We have that built into our software tranches where we say, this much of income, most of it, none of it. And it really varies. It as a parent, when I was paying the bills, if a school wouldn't be transparent with me as to why I didn't get money or how they were figuring it out, I personally wouldn't give a penny of my money to a college like that. But through the years, I've seen parents and like you're still going to send your child here. Like they're not being upfront with you about how they're getting to this number. It's not affordable for you. As a professional, I'm telling you this doesn't make sense. But that's where, the rankings and the craziness
No,
of
the
this,
prestige
it
sucks people in, and then they can make
it take
decisions that
it's
are not financially responsible.
Yeah, and it's buying brand. I mean, they literally are buying brand, and I would say that's not necessarily the best thing for kids either. That's not necessarily the place they're going to thrive. That's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, I've seen the same thing. And our data team is, always trying to get to these colleges. We have some stuff built in, and then I'll look at an award and I'm like, I totally can tell they're looking at home equity here, but they say they don't. So there's that kind of stuff going on at some schools as well.
Friends, this concludes this segment of an interview with Peg Keogh, Chief Academic Officer at College Aid Pro. Hope you join us next week for the next part.
And now it's time for our College Spotlight of the Week.
Friends, Raymond and I continue our conversation about internally transferring majors while at UT. Raymond explains how undeclared pathways work at UT. He calls the admission officers super sleuths when it comes to sussing out someone presenting themselves as if they have an interest in one major, they really have no interest in as a strategy to try to increase their chances of getting into UT with the hope of transferring internally later. Then we turn our attention to discussing UT's expanded resume, and then Raymond explains why UT releases decisions in waves. Listen and enjoy.
Once a student is here at UT Austin, they're also going to be assigned an advisor. And that advisor is going to be someone that's going to help pick up where my staff would leave off in terms of being able to work directly one-on-one with the student to continue to help them on to graduation.
Is there any path at all for undecided, undeclared? Like I know schools like Cal Poly that literally have no path for undeclared, undecided. And then there's other schools that admit by major a lot, like Virginia Tech, but there still can be an option there for an undeclared pathway.
Yeah, our undeclared pathways are within the colleges. And so generally when a student is undeclared or undecided, they are not sure about they want to be in the college, but they're not sure or still deciding between the different majors that are within that college.
Sure.
Every college doesn't have an undecided major. So for instance, engineering doesn't. Natural Sciences does. Moody College of Communication does. College of Liberal Arts does. And so it's not always a case. And of course, if you're in the School of Nursing, you are decided, right? So it isn't available in every instance, but in some of the colleges, we do offer an undecided option. But that undecided option is basically a student's way of saying, I'm interested in studying in this college, but I'm still exploring the different opportunities that are available within that specific college. And I know that when your students hear college, I want to make sure they understand that when we're talking about the university level, this is the University of Texas, and we're made up of different colleges, right? So there's 14 or so colleges that each of those colleges has a set of majors within them.
Yeah. And my last question on this, at least for now, some schools, for example, I had a student I was working with from Wisconsin last year who got into Minnesota and Maryland, but he wanted computer science. And so he did that first major, second major thing. He never got in for comp sci. And then he got the letter from them that said, there is no internal transfer for comp sci, and you just need to know that right up front. And so if that's what you want to do, you probably better go somewhere else. Do you have certain majors like that either have no internal transfer, or it's so rare that it ever happens that you almost feel the need to let students know that up front?
Absolutely. There are several majors that are that way. And to list them wouldn't be helpful, because a lot of that is also sometimes driven by the availability of spaces on a given year based on enrollment. But certainly there are some that do not offer the internal transfer pathway.
Is that something that's on the website, at least for the current year, if somebody was curious to know, or this is not something you make public?
Yeah, if it's not going to be available, we won't list it on the application. But again, that is only going to be something that students will be able to understand once they're to see when they're here and they're applying. So and if I were to tell you what it was this year, that could be different for the next
Sure.
year. And so we work with the different colleges and schools. And when we open that internal transfer application at that point in time, then the only majors that will be listed on the applications are those that are available. But I want to step back and say I would never encourage a student to enroll at UT Austin if their main goal is to internally transfer. There's so many great options. And the thing about it is there are great schools everywhere. If a student is coming into a situation knowing that they're going to do an internal transfer and they're putting all of their eggs in that basket, that may not end well for them in terms of getting the major that they want. And so we don't want that. We think, hey, especially if you're getting an offer at another institution that's going to be directly into the major that you're interested in. So I want to make sure that students don't see this as, hey, I'm going to choose XYZ major and I'm hoping or placing all my bets and being able to make this internal transfer pathway, because it does not always work in their favor.
I'm really glad you said that, because I'm on the counseling side, as you know, and I can't tell you how often times I get asked that.
Yeah.
The sort of the gamification, if you want to put it that way. I know that's a pejorative word, but hey, this is a school I want to go to. I know major plays a role, or even college plays a role. Yeah. I know that fill in the blank major/college is more competitive. Mm-hmm. So I want to switch over here. I mean, this is, it's understandable. I mean, people are trying to accomplish a goal, and if they think they can use a circuitous path to get there, why would they not do that? So it's helpful for people to hear that doesn't always end well. And in some cases, it's not even going to be available at all, I have another question on that. So I think probably the way you guys do this, the way you do admissions, you probably snuff this out more so than some places. But there's another person that will pick a major and you'll see no evidence of alignment with that major. Does that also play a role in the evaluation?
Absolutely.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. And I think we are super sleuths when it comes to that. We wonder why students are interested in a specific major, and particularly we can sometimes even find that there's these trends that are out there. We read Reddit, we read College Confidential like everyone else, and so we know that there's some things that people have, maybe a person has been successful with in the past, and they will report it, and then everyone says, okay, this is the pathway. But we're very careful about that. And this is one of the reasons why we look for what we call through lines, right? So those are connections to major. In fact, one of the short answer questions specifically asks, why are you interested in this major? And we're looking for, in that particular case, we're looking for, some evidence that the student not only wants to study that major, but they want to study that major here at UT Austin, right? That's very helpful for us. If a student wants to study nursing, I'll give you an example. Some students will indicate that they're interested in the medical field, but they don't really have a good sense or connection to what would make a good nurse, right? So and they may even say in their essay, hey, I'm interested in becoming a nurse or a doctor. Well, that isn't the pathway. Nursing is the specific pathway for nursing. If a student wants to go into medicine, to become a physician, there's a different pathway. So we read for those things, we look for those things, and we try to find that connection to major. Do we always get it right? No, but we do our best to make sure that we're putting, we're looking for students that will not only have a background that may say, hey, this could be a potential pathway for them, but we also think that it's incumbent upon us to also find or try to identify students that we think could be successful in those majors as well.
Yeah, so just if you're not following what Raymond was talking about, so somebody puts out on Reddit, College Confidential, or one of these forums that I know someone who got into UT for linguistics with like a 3.3 or something like this, you know what I mean? and then it spreads. Oh, that's like the plan. And so what he's saying is not only do we look for evidence in the file, but we're even monitoring the message boards, and we can sometimes even see a spike in applicants expressing interest in such and such major that's spread all over the internet. Is that a fair example?
Yeah. Very, very good. Absolutely.
This is probably a good point for us to transition to your expanded resume, because as you know, the majority of colleges actually don't want a resume in the country, right? Like they literally don't want it. Either use the, if you're on the Common App, which so many are, use the activity section there. There are a decent number that do, but you actively encourage in it a resume. And unlike a lot of people that do want them that say, we really prefer a one-pager, you guys have something called the expanded resume. So why don't you tell our listeners what that is and why you like it and how you find it helpful?
Sure. So first of all, the resume is an optional item. So many students will submit it, but it is certainly an optional item. We are wanting to provide students with opportunities to expound upon some of the co-curricular experiences that have been meaningful to them. And so the resume has no page count, no page limit. So a student is able, I'll stop again and say that again, a student is able to share a resume with more detail than they generally would. Now, again, this is an optional item, and we care so much about this piece that even if a student is not going to submit the optional resume, they have the second short answer question, which asks them to think about all of the co-curricular activities that they've been involved in and choose one and tell us why it's meaningful to them. So that's one of the short answer questions. So again, this is all at getting at understanding more about the student outside of the classroom, learning more about what the student is passionate about, and providing many ways for them to tell us about those things.
So something that multiple college counselors I know that are Texas based that send more kids to UT than I do often say that the expanded resume is one of the places where UT looks for evidence of interest in the major, like alignment of activities that show interest in the major. Do you feel that's a fair statement?
I don't think it's any more of a place that we look for alignment than anything else, but it is certainly a place where we can learn more. But we want to be careful that we don't put more emphasis on it because some students don't submit it and they are successfully admitted at times, right? So it is an optional item and it does provide more information. I will tell you, if it were me, I would take an opportunity and provide all the information that I can. If it's an optional item, I just would do it. But that's just me because it's just how my mind works. But it isn't anything that we will hold against the student if they don't. The Common App, as well as Apply Texas, provides an opportunity for students to list activities, and you can share some detail there as well. The resume is just an additional item. So I wouldn't put more emphasis on the resume outside of the fact that we want to make sure that if a student would like to share one with us, we'd love to read it.
But would it also be fair to say that if someone sends a 3 or 4 pager, you have no problem with that? Like there's
Absolutely.
there are a lot of places that say, if you're going to send it, I've heard an admission officer say, I'm 32, your resume need not be longer than mine, and mine is 2 pages. So that's not necessarily how Texas thinks. Like if you want to go, okay. Yeah. All right. Good stuff. So the next question comes from both a UT parent and one of our co-hosts. And I'm going to read it. UT has one of the most confusing decision release process decisions. Decisions are released in waves that are not always aligned with any admission plan, be it priority apps in the years past or early action plan that was rolled out in this past cycle. Why does UT announce their decisions the way they do? And is there any talk about changing this? So I'm just reading what some people asked me to ask you.
Very good. So this is a question that I'm sure many will have, and we have definitely had people ask us this question as well. Generally speaking, when we can make an admissions offer, in the past, we've tried to do that. I mean, why make a student wait when we know that this is a student that we would like to have join us here at UT Austin? People should understand that the decision dates are decision by dates. And so that means that if a student applies for early action, they'll receive a decision by January 15th. Now, keep in mind that decision for early action could be an admission decision, or it could be another decision or a decision of deferral, right? So and we spell that out. We're going to spell that out even more. I'm thinking about putting that on the on airplanes that fly over cities and that kind of stuff as well, because I
Love
think
it.
people miss that. And then the final date for the regular deadline is February 15th. So that is the by date. Now, if we have completed reading and completed all of the processes that we have, we're going to get decisions out as soon as we're able to do so. Now, we're not rolling. We're not on a rolling decision basis, but if we have a good set of students, and I hate to say good set of students, but if we feel that we can make decisions, we're going to try to do that when we can, but we will do it by the dates that we've spelled out. So when what people identify as waves are not necessarily planned waves, they're just the way that things are going for us. And of course, just like everyone else, we want to get an answer to students as soon as we're able to do it.
Does this have something to do with, look, we don't know how many applications we're going to get. And you guys
100%.
knew last year, you guys like went through the moon when you went on the Common App, and all you guys went through the moon with applications. And we want to be able to do a good job and give a good holistic review, but it allows us to not pigeonhole ourselves to a date when, what if we pop 20% in app reading and we're either not doing justice to the applications or we end up having an extended date, and it just that's what it sounds like as I put my admissions hat on when I read that.
100%, man. So it's our way of saying, no matter how many applications we get, we feel as if we can respond by these dates. That's the best way of describing it. I appreciate you for helping with that, because that's really what it is. And so now, we have gone, you talked about the jump in applications. We had 72,000 one year, and then the year prior. Then last year we went above 90,000 in apps, and so we have to put dates in place that can accommodate a potential increase in apps. And so that's why we give those dates and identify them as decisions by these deadlines.
What would you say to the listener who says, that sounds like rolling to me? How's it different from rolling?
Yeah, rolling is, I've worked at rolling institutions. Your decisions are released every week or on a cadence, right? And I can even talk about Georgia College, and we were definitely a competitive institution there as well, but we had, you apply by this date, you're going to receive this decision, and we had it on a kind of a rolling basis, if you would. Rolling is more frequent than what we would be able to accommodate based upon the number of apps that we receive.
Yeah. Friends, this concludes this part of my interview with Ramon Blakley. Hope you join us next week for the next segment. Friends, on Monday's episode, we continue with part 4 of 5. Susan and I interviewing one of the legends in the field of admissions, Bob Massa, as he bequeaths his wisdom to all of us concerning admissions and enrollment management. And then we have part 4 or 5 of our lawyers panel. 5 students, aspiring lawyers, talking to 2 lawyers, both partners on both coasts, and just bombarding them with any question they have. I'm so proud of our students. I thought they did a great job, and it's been nice hearing student voices. Hopefully you're enjoying this series, whether your kid is interested in law or not. And friends, never forget, hard work beats talent when talent refuses to work hard. See you on Monday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about your college-bound kid on your social media feed. And you can help us stay commercial-free and pay our staff by donating on the yourcollegeboundkid website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. And if you have a question or a recommendation, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK, hit the orange button, and speak. We will do our best to get your question in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I am the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admissions and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-hosts, Dr. Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Escobar in Massachusetts, Lynda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, New London, Connecticut, Hillary Dickman, an Admission Officer at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and our International Admissions Expert, Kevin Newton in Dallas, Texas. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs from Kimberly Bloss. Our reliable webmaster is Stalionis Dimitru. Website updates are done by Joyce Stucker. Our image editor is Vlad Honchar. If you want to have a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly YCBK newsletter, YCBK Plus, it is also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights, our blog, and our upcoming events. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.